In an associative array, the element's key acts as a sort of label, and when looping through an associative array, you have the option to work only with the array values or with both the keys, in other words the labels, and the values independently. If you're interested only in the values of each array element, you can use a for each loop in exactly the same way as earlier in this chapter with an indexed array. That's one that uses numbered keys. Let's refresh our memory of how that's done. Let's imagine that all we want to do is to display the content of each tagline in this features array. So we just scroll down a bit further into the page, and under this H2 heading here, we'll add a PHP block. And inside the block, we want a for each loop. For each, remember, is written as a single word. Don't split them up. Then the condition goes in parentheses. It's the features array. And then we use the as keyword to assign the value of each element to a temporary variable. Doesn't matter what you call it, but seeing as we've got an array called features, it seems sensible to use the singular feature. And then the loop itself goes inside a pair of curly braces. And inside the loop, we want to use echo to display the value. I'm going to use a double-quoted string. We need p tags at the beginning and end of each line, so it'll be open p tag, then feature. Because we're using a double-quoted string, that value will be displayed. Then a closing p tag, closing double quote, and a semicolon. There we are. Let's save that page and view the result in a browser. So we need to change to a different folder. It's the 04_08 folder, and the name of that file was foreach_assoc. And there are the values. They've been displayed by that for each loop in a series of paragraphs. But it's often more useful to get access to both the key, in other words the label, and the value. You do that by using two temporary variables inside the for each loop. So let's go back to our editor and see how that's done. Scroll down a little bit under this second H2 heading, add another PHP block. And inside that PHP block, we need a for each loop. As before, the first part of the condition is the name of the array that we're dealing with, which is features. And we also need to use the as keyword. And then we need two variables. It doesn't matter what you call the variables, but sometimes it can be difficult to decide. And I find that key and value really tell you exactly what you're working with. So that's what I'm going to use. So it's key, and then you use the double arrow, equal sign, greater than sign, and then value, a closing parenthesis, and then the loop goes inside a pair of curly braces. So inside here, I can have another double quoted string, begin with an opening p tag, and then the caption for the key feature is value. And a closing quote. No, we don't want that. We need a closing paragraph tag first, and then our closing quote and a semicolon. There we are. Let's just save that and go back to the browser, refresh, and then if I scroll down, the caption for the winter feature, that's the key, is, and there's the value. The caption for the spring feature, there's the key, and there's the value. So we're working with both the keys and the values by using those two temporary variables within the for each loop. So let's just go back to the editor and see that structure again, because it's a very important structure. It's for each, then the name of the array that you want to move through, the as keyword, then one variable for the label or the key, followed by a double arrow and another variable for the value. And you can use both the key and the value in your loop. And if you're interested only in the names of the keys, which sometimes happens, you still need to use this structure. You just ignore the second value after the double arrow. So you have two ways of looping through an associative array with a for each loop. If it's only the values of each array element that you're interested in, assign the array variable to a temporary variable with the as keyword, and use the temporary variable to get the current value inside the loop. If you want both the keys and the values, use two temporary variables separated by a double arrow. Inside the loop, the first temporary variable represents the current key, and the second represents the current value. Sometimes it's useful to find if a particular value exists in an array. One way to do so is to use a loop to check the value of each array element, but that's inefficient. A much quicker and simpler way is to use a function called inArray. To see how it works, let's use the indexed array flowers, which is at the top of this page on lines 2 and 3. The inArray function takes two arguments, the value you're looking for and the array you want to examine. Well, the array we want to examine is called flowers, and let's choose daffodils. We need to choose a value that we know is going to be there as a good test of whether it works or not. So let's go down into the HTML, and under the H1 element, let's create a PHP block. And the first thing we need to do inside there is to create a variable to store the value we're looking for. The variable I'm going to use, I'm going to call it order equals daffodils. And then we need an if-else structure to test whether daffodils is in that array. So if, and then the condition, and the condition will be in underscore array, and then the two variables, the two arguments that we need to pass to it. The first one is what we're looking for, so that's order, and the second argument is the array we want to inspect, and that's flowers. Closing parenthesis there for in array. We need a second closing parenthesis for the condition, and then we need a pair of curly braces for the conditional block. And inside there, if it exists, we want to display, so we're going to use echo, and we'll use a double quoted string. We'll have a paragraph, and yes, order are in stock. And then if it fails, we need an else clause, so else, and then that block down there. And inside there, we'll do echo, and another paragraph. Sorry, no order available. So if we save that page, we can now test it in a browser, and that will tell us whether daffodils is actually in the flowers array. So we need to go to the 09 folder, and the name of the page is in underscore array.php. And yes, daffodils are in stock. So let's see what happens if you choose something that's not there. If we change daffodils to a flower that we know is not in that array, definitely marigolds are not there. So save that and then go back to the browser, refresh it. Sorry, no marigolds available. So that's how you find out whether a particular value exists in an array. You use the inArray function, and it takes two arguments. The first argument is the value that you're looking for, and the second one is the array that you're looking in. And a useful way to remember the correct order of the arguments is you're looking for a needle in the haystack. And if the needle is in the haystack, inArray returns true. If it's not there, it returns false. It's time for another challenge. I'd like you to use the techniques we've explored in this chapter to change the main feature image and its tagline at the top of the Hansel and Petal homepage according to the season. It's this image here of white roses, and the tagline is beautiful arrangements for any occasion. To see what's involved, let's take a look at the code in index.php. The tagline is on line 41, beautiful arrangements for any occasion. and the image is on line 43. Its file name begins with 980_white_rows. Now, if you look in the images folder, you'll see there are 3 images all named feature underscore followed by the name of a season. So we've got feature autumn, feature spring, and feature summer. So the one that's missing is feature winter. And so you need to find 980 white rows. It's actually just up here on my screen, and rename that to feature underscore winter.jpg. All the images are the same size, so you don't need to worry about that. And if we go back to the code, we'll see that the alternate text is white rose arrangement. What I suggest you do is you change that to something neutral, such as seasonal flower arrangement. So all you need to do is to change the tagline on line 41 and the image on line 43. And to help you do that, I've created a couple of arrays. They're in a text file. You can find that in the H&P underscore check, and then the folder is 04_10, and it's called arrays.txt. And if we just open that, there are 2 arrays in there. The first one is an associative array called features, which contains the taglines. And the second one, seasons, is also an associative array, but it's slightly different from the arrays you've seen so far. The value of each key is another array. In other words, seasons is a multidimensional array. Now, although that might sound complicated, you should be able to access these subarrays using a for each loop to find out which one contains the first 3 letters of the current month. And if we go back to index.php, right at the very top of the page, this variable month name stores the first 3 letters of the month in lowercase. So that should make it quite easy for you to find whether a particular array contains the first 3 letters of the month. So this is admittedly a much tougher challenge than the previous ones, but give it at least a few minutes thought before watching the solution. The key to success with any programming language like PHP is to try to break down problems which seem very big into small solvable parts, and actually the solution is relatively simple. I hope I didn't fry your brain too much with that challenge. The idea is to change the main feature image, this image of white roses, and its associated tagline, up here, beautiful arrangements for any occasion, to match the season. And the solution lies in using a for each loop and the inArray function to identify the current season. Let's see how I did it. Let's go to the code first. And that image is on line 43. The image name begins with 980_white rose, etc. We need to change that so it follows a more predictable pattern. So let's open the images folder, and there is the 980 white rose. There are also 3 images that begin feature underscore followed by a season name. There's autumn, spring, and summer. So this one needs to be winter. Let's change that name. Feature underscore winter.jpg. Now there were 2 arrays that I created in a text file. Let's get them. They're in arrays.txt. Let's open that, copy them, and we need to paste them into index.php. And they need to go in the code block at the top. We don't need this print R anymore. It was used in a previous video and has already been commented out. So let's just delete that and then paste in those 2 arrays. The features array contains taglines for each season. What we need to do is to find the current season so we can display the correct tagline and the correct image. And that's what the seasons array is for. Seasons array looks a lot more complicated. In fact, each array key has the name of a season, but the value is another array. And this is what's known as a multidimensional array. It's an array of arrays. It's not quite as scary as it sounds. Just think of it as 4 arrays. But instead of each array being stored in a variable, it's identified by a string. So we have an array for winter, another for spring, and so on. And each array consists of the first 3 letters of the months in that season. If you can find which array contains the first 3 letters of the current month, you're well on the way to solving the task. Now let's go to the top of this page. And earlier in the course, these 2 lines of code, lines 2 and 3, they get the first 3 letters of the month and convert them to lowercase. So we can use this variable, month name, to identify the season that we're looking for. So let's do that. Scroll down here, and what we need to do is to create a for each loop to go through the seasons array. So for each, that's a keyword, it's a single word. And then the condition is the array that we want to loop through. That's the seasons array. Then the keyword as. We need 2 variables, one for the key and one for the values. I'm going to use key as the variable for the keys. So that'll be key, then the double arrow. Very often when I'm going through a for each loop like this, I'll use the variables key and value. To make it a little easier to follow, instead of using key and value, I'm going to use key and month array, because what we're looking at are arrays of months. So month array. And then we need curly braces for the loop. So right, inside this loop, what we need to do is to make some decisions. We need to find out if the current month is in that array that we're looking at. So that's a decision-making block, an if block. So if, and then we're going to use the inArray function to find out whether the particular month is in the array. So inArray, and the first argument to inArray is what we're looking for. That's the needle, and that's month name. And the second argument is where we're looking, and we're going through each array, each month array in turn. So it's month array that we're looking in. And then we need our little curly braces. That creates our conditional block. So if month name, if the first 3 letters of the month are in the current array that we're looking at, we're there. So what we need to do is we need to get the current key and store that in a variable, and that's going to be our season. So I'll call that variable season equals key. Once we've found the month, we don't need to go any further, so we can use break to stop the loop running. So I'm recording in October. So the first 3 letters of the month are OCT. And what is going to happen is as this loop goes through, the first time it will go through, it will be looking at the winter array. And it'll look at it using inArray. No, OCT is not in that one. It'll go through the next one. It's not in that one. Finally, it will get to the 4th one. It will say, aha, the key to this array is called autumn, so that becomes the season. Now we've got the season. It actually becomes very easy to do the whole of the rest of the challenge. So let's go down and find the tagline. Of course, the tagline has moved because we've put in extra code. There it is. It's now on line 59, and we need to delete that text, replace it with a PHP block. And what we're going to do here is we're going to echo, and we're using the features array for the taglines. And we need the correct season, and that's stored in the variable called season. And then with the image, instead of this long name here, we delete that name and we insert feature underscore, because all images begin with feature underscore. Then we need a PHP code block. And in that PHP code block, we're going to echo season. So what will happen is that the image will become feature underscore and whatever is stored in season. Make sure there's no space between the underscore and the opening PHP tag, and no space between the closing PHP tag and the .jpg. If there are any spaces there, of course, you'll break the file name. So let's just save that, go back to our browser and reload. And I've now got this tagline which says summer's over, but our flowers are still a riot of colours and a completely different image. As I say, I'm recording in October, so I've got the autumn selection. Depending on the time of year that you're following this course, you're likely to see a different image and caption. Admittedly, this has been a much more difficult challenge than previous ones, and it might take a little time for the logic to sink in. Let's go back to the code and just have a quick look at it. What we did was we got the first 3 letters of the month with month name, and then we used our 2 arrays, the features array and the seasons array, and then we looped through the seasons array to find the current season. So it was a question of just finding the season. Once we'd found the season and stored it in a variable, it was very easy to display the correct tagline and the correct image for the season. So take a well-earned rest before moving on to the next chapter, where we'll start using the real power of decision-making logic in PHP.